Now I'm going to show you how to prepare an MDF board if you are planning to use it as a surface for your painting. So first thing to notice about MDF board, it's actually not a proper piece of wood. It's created from chips and leftovers of the wood shavings, and it's connected with glue, meaning that it's a quite porous surface. That means if you would try to paint directly onto the MDF board, it will soak quite a lot of paint inside. It would create a waste of the paint. All right? Okay. The MDF boards that you are going to get from me also got another issue. They're cut on the laser cutter, so that means they're burnt. So you can see down here, they've got a dark edge. Okay, when you're burning the wood, that creates soot, which is greasy. Awesome, thank you very much for that. When you're burning the wood, it gives you a greasy surface. If you've got the grease, that means your paint is not going to stick properly, so it might peel off. So there are a few things that we need to deal with it. Okay, you will need an MDF board, something to spread your paint, the bigger brush the better, a gesso, which looks like your acrylic paint, but it's cheaper and it's got a bit of a different component, and it's also a bit more running. And you will also need some sandpaper. Yes. Okay. So we're going to start with the sandpaper. We're going to start with the rough sandpaper. I've got a number 80 here. Okay. That means it's kind of rough. Okay. And a few things that you need to do. First of all, you will need to sand a bit the surface that you're going to actually use as your support. So piece of sandpaper, and you're doing a circular motions, and you want to go over it to roughen it up. You don't have to go for long. You just need to make sure that you don't have like a total smoothness, because that will stop gesso of actually properly sticking into it. And another thing that you need to do, because you want to finish your paint support in a nice way, you will need to paint the sides of it. So you will need to sand those as well. Also with number 8. Get rid of all of the dust. Make sure that there's no dust on your area. And you can see that I'm not trying to get all of the color away. I'm just trying to roughen the surface so gesso is ready to be put on. All right. You will need to put few layers of this gesso. Hence, I'm showing it to you now because it's going to be easier for you to know that it's going to be a time-consuming exercise. It's always better to work on multiple boards so they dry, and then you can come back and just do a series of them. You can use a gesso straight from the pot, but I am just going to put some into a cup just to stop my white gesso getting dirty, should I have some dirtiness on my surface. Okay, so when you're adding a layer, you should be adding thin layers, and you should add your gesso in the same direction all over your layer, if that makes sense. On the same time, you can deal with your sides. Again, very thin amount of paint. Okay. If you've got any imperfections, now it's a time to get them out. Because when they dry, like hair from your brush or anything like that, it's just going to stay on the surface. This is something you will need to repeat multiple times, and you should be using a small amount of gesso. If you're trying to do it this way, you will create a very uneven surface. It's not actually the best way to do it. So thin layers are the best. Notice I've covered my table, so it's easy for me to tidy it up later on. This piece, now it's finished. I'm just going to go over it to smoothen my ready to put it away to dry. I've got a one that I've already painted once. So you can see that my strokes went in this direction. So my next layer needs to go into opposite direction. So I'm going to repeat the same exercise. Small amount of paint, painting in the opposite direction. Anyone knows why I'm doing it once like that, once like that? Yes, so that will create a smooth texture also, that will ensure that the gesso is covering everything evenly, and it's going to be easier to paint. Depending on your board and also depending on the quality of your gesso, you will need between 2 to 4 layers. Okay, if you are doing a realistic painting, you want definitely more layers and you want to smooth it out. Well, if you do an abstract, you probably don't want to be bothered too much about smoothing it out on the end, so you can just give it a rough gel. Okay, so you can see, because it's quick and wet, it's so much easier to deal with all of the 6 at the same time, let it dry, all of the 6, and so on. Okay. I've got another example here. This one's already got 3 layers, I think, so I'm ready for my last step. So when you've got enough layers, it's good for you to also roughen the surface so your acrylic paint can stick well to the gesso. This time I'm going to use a paper, sandpaper, that is a bit smoother, so I'm using 400. Anything between 300 and 600 will do. You need a small amount of that paper, and again, you're going to use circular motions. You don't want to overdone it, you just want to smoothen the surface and then also create little cracks so the paint can stick to it. Remember to also go around the edges, because you're going to put your initial paint on them and you want those backgrounds to be ready to show in the exhibition. Okay, so you don't have to bother with frames. Get rid of the dust. And this is now ready to paint your abstract. If I was painting something more realistic, I would probably spend a bit more time sanding my gesso. Thank you very much.